When your wife holds your own gun to your chest, the lies become clearer than the truth ever was. My name is Mason Graham, and I'm 35 years old. Each morning, I still wake before dawn to run my HVAC business, checking system diagnostics while the coffee brews. Christine, my wife of 7 years, betrayed me with Cameron, a wealthy donor from her nonprofit who convinced her I was holding her back. My stomach tightened when I found the hotel receipts tucked beneath her planner, proof that destroyed everything I thought we'd built together. I never imagined that confronting her with evidence would end with the cold steel of my Glock pointed at my heart. The same weapon I'd patiently taught her to handle for protection. I won't be erased by their manipulation or silenced by fear. The truth deserves witnesses. Before I go any further, let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow I will share a story you don't want to miss. But let me start from the beginning. I've always lived by routines. Wake at 5:30 a.m., coffee by 5:45, check the dispatch board by 6:15, first job by 7, lunch at whatever curb was closest to noon, home by 6 most nights. Weekends meant parts inventory and bookkeeping between whatever projects Christine had planned for us. The predictability wasn't boring. It was the foundation everything else was built on. Friday evening found me finishing up a furnace installation for the Millers, a retired couple whose system had died right when the Ohio autumn was showing its first real bite. The job ran 3 hours over, but I wasn't leaving them without heat for the weekend. "You're a godsend, Mason," Mrs. Miller said, pressing a tin of homemade cookies into my hands as I packed my tools. Not many businesses would stay this late on a Friday. "Just doing the job right," I told her, accepting the cookies with a nod. My back ached from 8 hours hunched in their crawl space, but seeing relief in her eyes made it worth it. The sunset painted the Lakefield sky in fading oranges as I loaded my truck. I checked my phone, 9:17 p.m., and no messages from Christine. That wasn't unusual lately. Her nonprofit work with at-risk teens kept her busy, especially since they'd landed that new community center donor, Cameron something. She mentioned him at least twice in every dinner conversation lately. "Cameron thinks we should expand the mentorship program." Cameron suggested a different approach to the funding allocation. Always Cameron. I texted her. "Running late, grabbing Chinese on the way home. Want your usual?" No response came as I pulled into Golden Dragon. I ordered anyway. Her favorite Kung Pao chicken and my beef and broccoli, plus egg rolls we could reheat tomorrow. Predictable, like everything else in our life. Or at least what our life used to be. The thing about marriage is that you develop a sixth sense for change. Small things that wouldn't register to anyone else become flashing neon signs. Christine used to text back within minutes. She used to leave her phone on the counter without thinking twice. She used to curl against me on the couch instead of sitting with that careful foot of space between us. Remember how classroom paste smelled in elementary school? That specific scent that wasn't exactly pleasant but took you straight back to construction paper and safety scissors? Sometimes memory hits you like that, unexpected and total. As I waited for the takeout, I suddenly remembered how Christine used to wait up for me with a beer already opened when I had late jobs, asking about every detail of my day like it was the most fascinating story she'd ever heard. I paid for the food and drove the final 10 minutes home, streetlights flickering on as darkness settled across our subdivision. Our house sat dark, except for the porch light I'd programmed to switch on at sunset. No Christine yet. Inside, I set the takeout on the kitchen island and checked the time, 9:42 p.m. I shot her another text. "Food's getting cold. Everything okay?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Meeting ran over. "Be home soon." I sighed, putting her food in the microwave, but not heating it yet. Our kitchen was spotless. Christine had always been meticulous about that. The calendar on the fridge showed her community center commitments in her neat handwriting. Fundraising committee, donor meetings, youth program planning. So many evening obligations that hadn't been there 6 months ago. Trust is a choice you make every day. I chose to believe her late nights were exactly what she said, dedication to work that mattered. I chose to ignore how she angled her phone screen away when messages came in. I chose not to mention how her perfume sometimes smelled different when she came home. The front door clicked open at 10:17 p.m. Christine swept in, her blonde hair slightly disheveled, cheeks flushed. "Sorry I'm so late," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. The budget meeting with Cameron went long, and then he wanted to discuss some new donation parameters. No problem, I said, getting up to heat her food. How'd it go? Good. Great, actually. She smiled vaguely, setting her purse down and slipping off her heels. He's really committed to the center. I nodded, watching her movements. Slightly too careful, too measured, like someone trying to appear normal. Hungry? I asked. Actually, we ordered in during the meeting. I should probably shower. Early morning tomorrow. Another deviation from our routine. I used to know every rhythm of our life together. Now I was learning new patterns I wasn't sure I understood. Sure, I said. I'll clean up. She disappeared upstairs, and I packed away the untouched food, wiped down counters that were already clean. Her phone sat on the charger where she'd plugged it in, a habit so automatic she hadn't thought about it. The screen lit up with a notification. Same room as last time, C. My hand froze mid-wipe. The refrigerator's soft hum suddenly the loudest sound in the world. Morning came like it always did, too early and without mercy. I'd barely slept, that text message replaying in my mind every time I closed my eyes. Same room as last time. C. There could be explanations. Maybe it was about a conference room for a meeting. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't there. But my gut had been screaming for weeks. The bed shifted as Christine rolled over, still deep in sleep. I slipped out quietly, moving through our bedroom with practiced silence. Her phone sat charging on her nightstand. My fingers hovered over it for just a second before I picked it up. This wasn't me. I'd never been the guy who checked his wife's messages, but I'd also never been the guy whose wife came home late smelling like someone else's cologne. I connected her phone to my laptop and started the backup process. 6 minutes that felt like 6 hours, watching the progress bar creep forward while listening for any change in her breathing. When it finished, I disconnected everything and put her phone back exactly as I'd found it. She never stirred. By 7:30, I was at the shop. Saturday was usually our busiest day, but I'd planned to start late. I needed time with these files before customers started calling about broken air conditioners. The first hour yielded nothing unusual. Photos of fundraising events, texts with coworkers about scheduling. Then I found it. Credit card statements. Our shared account showed charges for the Parkview Hotel in Columbus. 3 separate occasions, all in the past 2 months. All for room 417. I called Mark. He picked up on the third ring, voice groggy. It's early, man. What's up? Need your help at the shop, I said, keeping my voice even. That Hendrix compressor is giving me trouble. Now? It's Saturday morning. I know what day it is. Just come. An hour later, he pulled into the lot. I was already elbow deep in the compressor, which actually had been giving me trouble. I hadn't lied about that part. Hand me that wrench, I said when he walked in, not looking up from my work. He passed it over. What's going on? You sound like someone died. I set the wrench down and wiped my hands on a shop rag. I need to show you something. We went to my office, and I pulled up the hotel charges. Mark leaned in, squinting at the screen. Room 417, he read. 3 times. Same room? Yeah. Could be business meetings, he offered, but his tone said he didn't believe it either. At a hotel 40 miles away? On weeknights? I scrolled through more statements. Look at this. Dinner charges at Luciana's the same nights. That's the restaurant inside the hotel. Mark sat down, running a hand through his hair. Shit, Mason. Yeah. I kept scrolling, methodical, searching. Cameron's the donor she's always meeting with, the one who supposedly cares so much about community programs. Mark nodded, frowning. The guy she mentioned at the barbecue last month? That's him. We worked on the compressor for another hour, Mark helping me trace more transactions while we swapped out parts. Neither of us talked much. What was there to say? By evening, I'd printed everything. Credit card statements, text message logs, location data showing her phone at the Parkview when she claimed to be at the community center. I folded it all carefully and tucked it into my truck's glove compartment. When I got home, Christine was in the kitchen making dinner. She smiled when I walked in, brighter than she had in weeks. Hey, you're home early, she said, stirring something that smelled like garlic and butter. I thought you'd be at the shop all night. Got the Hendrix compressor fixed faster than I thought, I replied, watching her face, looking for tells. How was your day? Good. Had a board meeting this morning. We're finalizing next month's youth program. She turned back to the stove. Cameron thinks we can get matching funds from the county. There it was again. Cameron. You've been working with him a lot lately, I said, keeping my tone casual as I washed my hands at the sink. She stiffened slightly. Someone who didn't know her body language as well as I did might have missed it. "He's our biggest donor," she said. "That's how fundraising works, Mason." "I know," I said. "Just seems like a lot of late nights." She set the wooden spoon down with more force than necessary. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, just an observation." "Sounds more like an accusation." Her voice had that edge now. "Are we really doing the jealous husband routine? Because it's beneath you." "I'm not being jealous," I said, though my heart was pounding. "Just asking about your day." "No, you're questioning me," she snapped. "Like I need to account for every minute I'm not with you. It's suffocating, Mason." I could have pushed it. Could have pulled out the hotel receipts right then. But something told me to wait. Get all the facts first. Have the conversation once and have it right. "You're right," I said instead. "Long day. I'm tired." Dinner was quiet. Afterward, she went upstairs to shower. I heard the water running and slipped into the bedroom where her tablet sat on the dresser. The password was still the same one she'd used for years, her mother's birthday. Old habits. I found the photos in her recently deleted folder. Her and Cameron in a hotel bathroom mirror. Her smile wide and genuine in a way it hadn't been with me in months. His hand on her hip, possessive. My breath caught in my throat. The sound of the shower seemed suddenly far away, like I was underwater. I switched off the tablet and set it back exactly as I'd found it, my hands trembling. "Not yet," I whispered to myself. I needed to do this right, face to face, with all the evidence laid out where she couldn't twist or deny it. Just not yet. Thursday evening stretched across the horizon in streaks of orange and purple as I pulled into the driveway. 5 days I'd been carrying those receipts in my glove box. 5 days of watching Christine check her phone and smile at messages that weren't from me. 5 days of wondering if I was crazy or just finally seeing what had been there all along. I'd left work early, telling the guys I had a headache. What I had was a weight pressing against my ribs that wouldn't let up. Tonight was the night for truth. The house was quiet when I walked in. I set the Chinese takeout bag on the counter, lo mein from the place Christine used to love before she started saying it was too greasy. I arranged the white containers neatly, like setting the stage for what was coming. From my jacket pocket, I pulled the folded papers, hotel receipts, credit card statements, the photos I'd printed from her tablet. I laid them across the kitchen island in a neat row, like exhibits, evidence. Then I waited. When the garage door hummed open at 7:43, my mouth went dry. I heard her heels on the concrete, then the inner door opening. Christine's purse swung from her arm as she walked in, phone still in hand. "Mason," she said, surprised. "You're home early?" "I brought dinner." My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Too steady, maybe. Too controlled. She glanced at the takeout containers, then at the papers on the counter. Her smile flickered. "What's all this?" "Something we need to talk about." I gestured to the bar stool across from me. "Sit down? I've been in meetings all day. Can it wait?" She set her purse on the counter but remained standing. "No." I slid the hotel receipt toward her. "Room 417, 3 nights. Paid on our card." She picked it up, her expression shifting from confusion to something harder. "Why are you going through my things?" The question came out soft, accusing. "Seriously, Mason, why are you stalking my phone and credit cards?" "I'm asking about the hotel, Christine." She laughed, a small, dismissive sound. "This could be anything. A mistake. Maybe one of the donors used our company card. You know how messy the billing gets." "And these?" I pushed the printed text messages toward her. "And this?" "The photo." Her eyes darted from the evidence to my face. "You really went through my tablet? My private messages? What is wrong with you?" "Answer me," I said, my voice still level. "Tell me about Cameron." Something flickered in her eyes at his name. Then her face smoothed into practiced calm. "Cameron is a donor. He supports our youth program. I've told you this." "You're sleeping with him." "Oh my God." She stepped back, shaking her head. "You're being dramatic. You always turn normal things into accusations." Her voice rose slightly. "Maybe you need help, Mason. This paranoia isn't healthy." "Stop lying to me." I kept my tone even. "I know about Columbus, about room 417, about the dinners at Luciana's. You're seeing what you want to see." She picked up her purse again. "I can't deal with this right now. Christine, please, just tell me the truth." Her calm cracked. "The truth is you're controlling. You always have been, with your lists and your schedules and your questions about where I've been." I stared at her, this stranger wearing my wife's face. Just answer me." She turned and walked toward the hallway. I followed, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Christine, don't walk away. We need to talk about this." She veered toward the closet in the hallway, the one where I kept the gun safe. My chest tightened. "What are you doing?" I asked. She yanked open the closet door. "I'm not doing this." I stepped closer. "Stop, please." When she turned, she was holding the Glock I'd taught her to handle at the range months ago. Her fingers tightened around the grip, just like I'd shown her. "Back off, Mason." Her voice was flat, cold. I raised my hands, palms open. "Put the gun down. We can talk about this. If you don't shut up, I swear I'll make you leave." She was trembling, but her grip remained firm. "I'm calling 911, I said, reaching slowly for my phone. "Don't you dare." Her voice rose to a shout. "You're trying to trap me. You're the one causing all of this." I dialed anyway, my eyes never leaving the gun. When the dispatcher answered, I spoke clearly. "I need help." "My wife has a gun pointed at me." Christine raised the Glock, aiming it at my chest. Two hands, just like at the range. "Hang up," she hissed. "Sir, are you in immediate danger?" The dispatcher's voice was crisp in my ear. "Yes," I answered. "She's pointing a Glock at me right now." "Police are on their way. Stay on the line." Christine paced, the gun still trained on me. "You're ruining my life," she said, her voice breaking. "You and your accusations and your control." "Put the gun down," I repeated. "The police are coming." Her eyes widened with panic. "You called the cops? On me?" Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Christine's face contorted. "Tell them it was a mistake," she demanded. "Tell them now." "No." The front door burst open. Officers Ramirez and Blake entered, weapons drawn. "Police, drop the weapon!" Officer Ramirez shouted. Christine screamed, the gun still clutched in her hand. "Drop it now," Blake commanded. She let go. The Glock clattered against the tile floor as Ramirez moved forward, twisting her arms behind her back. The click of handcuffs echoed in the suddenly silent house. The next morning, I stood in my driveway watching the police cruiser back out onto Maple Street. Christine sat in the back seat, her face turned away from me. The taillights flashed red at the stop sign, then disappeared around the corner. Just like that, she was gone. Detective Colton Hayes approached me, his weathered face unreadable. "Mr. Graham, we need to secure the firearm as evidence." I nodded, leading him back inside to where Officer Ramirez had placed the Glock on the kitchen counter, now tagged and documented from the night before. "This is your registered weapon, correct?" Hayes asked, snapping on latex gloves. "Yes, Springfield XD9. I've had it about 3 years." I watched as he carefully lifted it, checking the chamber before placing it in a large evidence bag. "We'll need you to walk us through everything again," Hayes said, sealing the bag with practiced efficiency. From the beginning, I spent the next hour recounting it all, finding the receipts, the messages, the confrontation. I showed him the data backup from Christine's phone, the hotel charges, everything. Hayes took methodical notes, his expression giving nothing away. "The firearm's serial number matches your registration," he confirmed. "Mrs. Graham has been booked for aggravated menacing and domestic violence. There will be an arraignment within 48 hours. When they finally left, the house felt hollow. I wandered from room to room, touching familiar objects that suddenly seemed to belong to someone else's life. The coffee mug Christine had used yesterday morning, the throw blanket she wrapped around herself on movie nights. All of it felt like props on an abandoned stage. My father's truck pulled into the driveway around noon. Gary Graham walked in without knocking, a grocery bag in one hand. "Brought sandwiches," he said simply. We sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd confronted Christine less than 24 hours ago. "She could have killed you," Dad finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't think she would have pulled the trigger. Doesn't matter. You point a gun, you've crossed a line." He unwrapped his sandwich but didn't eat. "Your mother would have driven straight to that jail and given her a piece of her mind." The mention of Mom made my throat tighten. She'd been gone 5 years, but her absence still felt fresh sometimes. "Stay focused," Dad advised. "They'll try to make this about the affair, not the gun. Don't let them." That night, after Dad left, I sat at the kitchen table reviewing the paperwork Hayes had left. The 911 transcript was stark in its simplicity. "Dispatcher, 911, what's your emergency?" Caller, "I need help. My wife has a gun pointed at me." Dispatcher, "Sir, are you in immediate danger?" Caller, "Yes. She's pointing a Glock at me right now." 3 days passed in a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Then came the notice. Christine had made bail. Her attorney, Paul Mendez, released a statement to the local press suggesting I had fabricated details to punish an affair. The words made my stomach turn. I contacted the prosecutor's office and was assigned to ADA Kendra Brooks. She was direct, efficient, her voice carrying the steady confidence of someone who'd seen it all before. "This isn't unusual," Brooks explained. "Defense will try to reframe this as an emotional overreaction to infidelity. We'll focus on the facts, the weapon, the 911 call, the officer statements." Mark stopped by that evening, bringing pizza and determination. "I'm here for whatever you need," he said, "including testifying." "About what?" "Remember when Christine asked me about pointing a gun to scare someone? It was about 6 months ago. She made it sound hypothetical, but now—" I stared at him. "She what?" "Said she was writing something for work. Wanted to know if brandishing a firearm would legally count as a threat." He shook his head. "I didn't think anything of it then." My phone rang around 8. Sharon Miles, Christine's mother. I almost didn't answer. "Mason, please," she began, her voice tense with emotion. "This has gone too far. Can't you drop the charges?" "For Christine's future?" "She pointed a gun at me, Sharon. She made a mistake. She was upset. It wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. You're destroying her life over an indiscretion," she hissed, the pretense of civility evaporating. "What kind of man does that?" I hung up quietly, my hand trembling slightly. The depth of the manipulation stunned me. In their world, pointing a loaded gun was an indiscretion, and standing up for myself made me vindictive. My phone buzzed again. Blocked number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello?" For a moment, just breathing. Then Christine's voice, barely above a whisper. "You'll regret this." I ended the call, but my pulse had already spiked, hammering against my ribs as though trying to escape. 2 days later, I sat in a downtown office that smelled like coffee and leather-bound books. Sunlight streamed through vertical blinds, casting stripes across the polished desk. Lila Chu watched me from behind her rimless glasses as I placed a manila folder in front of her. "That's everything," I said. "Hotel receipts, phone records, the photographs." She opened the folder and thumbed through the contents methodically, her expression unchanging except for a slight tightening around her eyes. "You did well to preserve this," she said finally. "Most clients come in with nothing but their word." "HVAC work teaches you to document everything," I replied. "Customers forget what they asked for, what you fixed." Lila nodded. "Marriage isn't so different." She leaned forward. "Mason, we need to move quickly on 2 fronts. First, a protection order to keep Christine away from you and your property. Second, we need to freeze your joint accounts immediately." She wouldn't. "They always do," Lila cut me off gently. "When people feel cornered, they grab what they can. I've seen spouses drain decades of savings in a single afternoon." The thought of Christine emptying our accounts made my stomach tighten. We'd built those balances together, penny by penny, year after year. "Do it," I said. Lila was already dialing her paralegal. "Jen, I need emergency filings on Graham, both the PO and the asset freeze." "Yes, today." While Lila worked, my phone buzzed with a text from ADA Brooks. "Meeting with Detective Hayes at 3 p.m. Bringing your statements and the 911 recording. Be there." I remembered those first moments after the police arrived. The officers separating us. Christine crying, suddenly soft-voiced, claiming fear. Me standing barefoot on my own kitchen tile, explaining why I'd called 911. "I just got a text from the prosecutor," I told Lila. "They're gathering evidence this afternoon." "Good. Criminal case builds our civil one." Lila slid a document across the desk. "Sign here for the emergency protection order. It prevents Christine from coming within 500 feet of you, your home, or your workplace." As I signed, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a court summons for a pre-hearing meeting in 3 days. "That was fast," Lila noted, reading over my shoulder. "Is that normal?" "No. Someone's pushing. Either the prosecutor wants to lock this down, or Christine's attorney is trying to rush before we're prepared." She made a note. "I'll be there." Later that afternoon, I met Ada Brooks and Detective Hayes at the prosecutor's office. Hayes was older than I'd expected, with weathered skin and alert eyes that missed nothing. "Your 911 call is gold," Brooks said without preamble. "We have Christine clearly audible in the background, making threats while you remained calm." Hayes nodded. "The responding officer's body cams captured her with the weapon. Between that and the call, we've got solid evidence for the menacing charge." "Christine filed a counter-complaint this morning," Brooks added, her expression grim. Claims you cornered her and that the gun was for self-defense. My jaw tightened. That's a lie. We know, Hayes said. The 911 tape contradicts her version, but her attorney will try to sell it. 3 days later, I walked up the courthouse steps for the pre-hearing meeting, Lila at my side. As we approached the doors, a familiar voice called my name. Mason. I turned. Cameron stood 20 feet away, hands in his pockets, looking less confident than I remembered. You need to drop this, he said. For everyone's sake. Lila touched my arm in warning, but I stepped toward him. You're violating the protection order by being here, I said evenly. If you're smart, you'll leave now. His jaw flexed. This can all go away. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. She pointed a gun at me. She was scared. You were threatening her. I laughed, a short, harsh sound that surprised even me. There's a recording, Cameron. The police heard everything. You really want to add witness tampering to your problems? Something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. This isn't over, he muttered, backing toward his car. Actually, I called after him. It's just beginning. That night, I drove to my shop to finish paperwork. The moment I unlocked the door, I knew something was wrong. The air smelled different, paint fumes and disturbed dust. I flipped on the lights. The place had been ransacked. Toolboxes overturned, papers scattered, and spray painted across the back wall in dripping red letters. Liar. I called Hayes immediately. He arrived 20 minutes later, taking photographs and notes. Cameron? I asked. Hayes shrugged. Fits the pattern. Intimidation escalating to property damage. We'll check traffic cams, see if we can place his vehicle. It took 2 hours to document everything. When Hayes finally left, I locked up the shop, my determination hardening into something like iron. As I stepped into my driveway, headlights suddenly washed over me, bright and intrusive. A car idled at the curb, engine rumbling in the quiet night. I stood my ground, refusing to flinch. After a long moment, the car accelerated sharply and disappeared down the street. The courthouse smelled of floor polish and anxiety. I adjusted my tie, the blue one Dad had insisted I wear, and checked my watch. Ada Brooks strode toward me, briefcase swinging, her expression giving nothing away. Ready? She asked. As I'll ever be, I replied, following her through the heavy oak doors. Inside, the pretrial hearing was already filling with the usual cast, clerks shuffling papers, officers stationed by the walls, and a handful of spectators. Paul Mendez, Christine's attorney, sat at the defense table, leaning close to whisper something in Christine's ear. She wore a pale blue blouse I'd never seen before, her hair pulled back in a modest ponytail, the perfect picture of vulnerability. My stomach knotted. I'd seen that calculated look before, in our kitchen, seconds before she'd reached for the Glock. Judge Harmon called the room to order, and the proceedings began with standard motions. Ada Brooks presented the state's evidence, the 911 recording, officer testimonies, and the ballistics report confirming the Glock had been loaded and the safety off. Then Mendez stood, straightening his expensive suit. Your Honor, the defense would like to introduce a key piece of evidence that puts this entire incident in proper context. He approached the bench with a manila folder. This photograph was taken at Lakefield Memorial Hospital 2 days after the alleged incident. The bailiff handed the folder to Judge Harmon, who studied its contents with narrowed eyes before passing it to Ada Brooks. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. This shows my client's arm, Mendez continued, with clear bruising consistent with being forcefully grabbed. Mrs. Graham sought medical attention after experiencing pain, and hospital staff documented what they observed. I leaned forward, disbelief washing through me. There hadn't been any bruise because I'd never grabbed her. It was another lie, another manipulation. Ada Brooks rose immediately. Your Honor, this photograph was never provided during discovery. Additionally, there's no chain of custody established, no medical report accompanying it, and no indication of when or how this alleged injury occurred. It only came to our attention yesterday, Your Honor, Mendez countered smoothly. And regarding causation, Mrs. Graham will testify that her husband grabbed her forcefully during their altercation before she took defensive measures. Defensive measures? I whispered to Brooks. She pointed a loaded gun at my chest. Judge Harmon adjusted his glasses. I'll allow the photograph for context, Ms. Brooks. The jury can weigh its credibility against other evidence. Brooks nodded curtly, but I could see her frustration. The hearing continued with Mendez's next motion, to suppress portions of the 911 call. Your Honor, Significant sections of this recording contain Mr. Graham's emotional narration and interpretation of events, not factual reporting. These prejudicial statements would unfairly influence jurors. My heart sank as Judge Harmon reviewed the transcript. After several minutes, he looked up. I'm granting partial suppression. The portions where Mr. Graham describes previous suspicions and characterizes Mrs. Graham's intentions are excluded. Only direct observations of the immediate threat remain admissible. It felt like watching someone erase parts of reality. The context, Christine's manipulation, her calculated approach to the closet, her earlier threats, all gone, leaving only disconnected moments that could be reinterpreted. When the hearing ended, Lila Chu met us in the corridor, having observed from the back. The protective order stands, she assured me. That's what matters most right now. But they're twisting everything, I said, keeping my voice low as people streamed past. That's what defense attorneys do, Brooks replied. But we still have the responding officer's testimony, the ballistics report, and enough of the 911 call to establish threat. Walking to the parking lot, I noticed two neighbors from down the street. They quickly looked away when I nodded hello. The message was clear. They'd heard something and weren't sure what to believe anymore. That evening, Dad grilled steaks behind my house, the familiar smell of charcoal taking me back to simpler summers. I'd always loved watching him work the grill, methodical and patient, waiting for the perfect moment. People will believe what they want, he said, flipping a steak with practiced precision. Truth isn't about convincing everyone. It's about staying right with yourself. She's lying about everything, Dad, making up bruises that never happened. He nodded, eyes on the grill. Then stick to what did happen. Evidence doesn't lie, even when people do. After dinner, I sat alone in my living room, replaying what remained of the 911 tape through headphones. With the judge's redactions, it sounded different, clinical, stripped of emotion. The fear that had tightened my throat when Christine raised the gun was gone. All that remained was a series of statements that could be interpreted in multiple ways. My phone buzzed just after midnight. A text from Mark. Found something you need to hear. Call me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as I pulled into Mark's auto shop. The neon Holloway's Repairs sign buzzed overhead, casting a blue glow across the empty parking lot. It was just past 7 in the morning, but Mark was already there, garage door halfway up. Thanks for coming so early, he said, wiping his hands on a shop rag as I climbed out of my truck. Your text sounded important. He nodded, motioning me inside. It is. Been up half the night making sure I wasn't imagining things. The shop smelled of motor oil and coffee. Mark led me past a lifted Chevy to his cramped office in the back corner. The desk was cluttered with invoices, but his laptop sat open. A media player paused on screen. Remember last year when Christine called asking advice about your gun? Mark said, settling into his chair. I thought it was weird, but figured she was just nervous about you keeping one in the house. I remember you mentioning something about it. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. But I didn't think much of it then. I back up everything to cloud storage. Texts, voicemails, the works. I was searching for an old customer's contact info and found this instead. He clicked play. Christine's voice filled the small office, clear and deliberate. Hey Mark, quick question since you know about this stuff. How do you point a gun to scare someone without actually shooting? Mason's been teaching me basics, but I want to understand. Intimidation versus actual threat. Call me back. My stomach dropped. The timestamp showed 7 months ago. She was planning this, I whispered, the realization settling like ice in my chest. All this time. Mark stopped the playback. There's more. She called twice that week with similar questions. He looked up at me, his expression grim. Mason. She was rehearsing. The coffee I'd grabbed on the drive suddenly tasted like acid. I remembered how proud I'd been teaching Christine gun safety, how careful I'd been to emphasize responsibility. All while she was taking mental notes for something else entirely. I need a copy, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Detective Hayes needs to hear this. 2 hours later, I sat across from Hayes in his office. The detective's weathered face remained impassive as he played the recordings again. Ada Brooks stood by the window, her arms crossed. The timestamp metadata appears intact, Hayes said, clicking through the file information. I'll send it to our tech unit for full authentication, but this looks legitimate. It corroborates what we found in the text exchanges between Christine and Cameron, Brooks added, turning toward us. Particularly the message about making Mason look dangerous. Hayes nodded. This changes things. Shows premeditation. Intent to intimidate. I stared at the desk, remembering Christine's face when she'd pointed the Glock at me. Not frightened, but determined. She knew exactly what she was doing. Brooks sat down across from me. Mason, I want to arrange one more meeting, recorded, with both legal teams present. Let's see how they respond when confronted with this evidence. 3 days later, we gathered in a conference room at the courthouse. Lila sat beside me, while Mendez flanked Christine. Sharon Miles had insisted on attending, sitting slightly behind her daughter, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Christine wouldn't meet my eyes. Her hair was pulled back severely, her expression composed into victimhood. I'd seen that look before, practiced innocence masking calculation. We're here to discuss new evidence, Brooks began, and potentially reconsider plea options. Sharon leaned forward. This has gone too far. Can't we find peace? This is tearing our family apart. I looked directly at Sharon. I wanted peace. I never wanted any of this, Christine interjected, voice quivering with manufactured emotion. I was defending myself. Mason had me cornered. Is that why you asked Mark how to point a gun to intimidate someone? I cut in. 7 months ago? The room went silent. Brooks slid the transcript across the table. Mendez scanned it, his confident posture faltering slightly. Christine's face drained of color. This is, she began, then stopped, looking to Mendez for guidance. Sharon's eyes filled with tears as she read over Christine's shoulder. Oh, honey, she whispered. What have you done? Christine's expression hardened into a glare aimed directly at me. If looks could kill, I'd have been another statistic. Brooks broke the silence. Detective Hayes, please arrange a subpoena for Mr. Cameron's phone records. I believe we'll find additional corroborating evidence there. As we left the conference room, Hayes's phone buzzed. He stepped aside to answer, then turned to me with renewed urgency. Just got a tip from patrol. Cameron was spotted entering Christine's apartment 20 minutes ago. He's violating his bail conditions. Hayes was already heading for the elevator. I'm alerting units now. I was just settling in with a sandwich when my phone rang around 9 that evening. Detective Hayes' name lit up the screen. Mason, he said, his voice tight with urgency. Thought you should know. We're outside Christine's apartment right now. Neighbors called in a disturbance. Cameron's here. My grip tightened on the phone. What happened? Shouting match loud enough that 3 different units called it in. Officer Ramirez is with me. I heard muffled voices in the background, then Hayes continued. We're going in now. I'll call you back. I paced my kitchen for the next 40 minutes, unable to sit still. The sandwich lay forgotten on the counter. When Hayes finally called back, I answered before the first ring finished. Got him, Hayes said, satisfaction evident in his voice. Cameron had a handgun in his trunk, violating bail conditions and firearm restrictions in one go. Not the brightest move. Christine? In a state. Tried to explain it all away. Said Cameron came to discuss legal strategy, and they argued about how to handle your evidence. Hayes' voice dropped slightly. When we mentioned the gun, she lost it. Started screaming that she didn't know about it, that we were setting her up. I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. What happens now? Cameron's being processed for witness tampering and unlawful possession. We'll hold him overnight. There was a pause. This changes things, Mason. After hanging up, I called Lila, who picked up despite the late hour. I heard, she said immediately. Ada Brooks already contacted me. Is this good for us? I asked, feeling strange about framing it that way. It's significant. Cameron just demonstrated exactly the kind of behavior pattern that supports your account. Her voice was measured, but couldn't hide a note of satisfaction. This coupled with the voice messages from Mark, the narrative is shifting decisively. I remembered Christine's face across the conference table earlier that day. Cold, calculating, cornered. I should have felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt tired. The next morning, Ada Brooks called me into her office. She wasn't one for small talk. Forensics report came back on the Glock, she said, sliding a folder across her desk. Christine's prints are on the grip, exactly as you'd expect if she was holding it the way you described. Her DNA is on the safety. I nodded slowly, not touching the folder. And? Residue patterns confirm it was chambered and aimed, not just handled. Brooks leaned forward. Mason, this is textbook. The gun wasn't just brought out. It was prepared to be fired. My throat tightened. I'd known this, lived it, but hearing it confirmed made my hands shake slightly. I remembered the cold determination in Christine's eyes that night, how the barrel had looked impossibly dark pointed at my chest. What about the bruise she claimed I caused? Medical examiner can't confirm the timing. Could have happened any time within a 5-day window. Brooks straightened some papers on her desk. With the new evidence, I'm pushing for a plea. Your divorce attorney is ready with the civil side. 2 days later, I sat with Lila as she finalized the divorce filing. I've included evidence of financial impropriety, she explained. The hotel charges on your joint account, documented correspondence with Cameron. We're seeking full property rights to the house and restitution for the safe she tampered with. I blinked. What safe? The one in your shop. Security footage shows her trying to access it 3 days before the incident with the gun. Lila raised an eyebrow. You didn't know? I shook my head, remembering the disarray in my workshop. I thought it was just vandalism. Later that afternoon, I was called to witness a closed-door conference. Christine sat with Mendez, her posture rigid. Sharon wasn't present this time. Ada Brooks methodically outlined the charges: aggravated menacing with a firearm specification, violation of the protection order, and coordination in tampering attempts. As Brooks detailed the evidence, the 911 call, forensic reports, Mark's recordings, Cameron's arrest, Christine's composure finally cracked. Her shoulders slumped, and tears streaked her makeup. 8 to 10 years, Brooks concluded. That's what we're looking at with these charges. Mendez whispered something to Christine, who nodded almost imperceptibly. The next morning, I walked into the courtroom, the air heavy with tension. The judge looked directly at Christine, her expression stern but neutral. Ms. Graham, in light of recent developments, do you wish to change your plea? 3 weeks later, I stood in the hushed courtroom, hands steady at my sides. The judge had asked if I wanted to make a statement before sentencing. I'd thought about this moment for days. What to say, how to say it. Not for revenge, for truth. Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice carrying in the quiet room. I could feel eyes on me. The prosecutors, Lila's, my father's in the back row. Christine kept her gaze down, shoulders hunched in the dark blue jumpsuit they'd given her after revoking bail. She looked smaller somehow. I met Christine Graham 8 years ago, I began, and I loved her enough to build a life with her. I worked overtime to help fund her nonprofit career. I supported her dreams. I believed in our marriage. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I'd rehearsed this, but speaking the words still felt like pulling something heavy from deep inside me. What happened that night wasn't about jealousy or control. It was about trust, broken beyond repair. I paused, meeting the judge's eyes. Christine didn't just have an affair. She pointed a loaded gun at my chest when I discovered it. If this goes ignored, the next husband won't survive it. A soft murmur rippled through the courtroom. I thought about all those nights I'd lain awake, replaying the sight of her hands steady on that Glock. I don't ask for vengeance, I continued. I ask for consequences that match actions, for protection for others who might come after me, and for a chance to rebuild what was taken from me, my safety, my home, my trust in people. I finished, nodding slightly to the judge. As I returned to my seat, Christine's shoulders trembled, but she never looked up. The proceedings moved forward. Christine accepted a plea for aggravated menacing with a firearm specification and violation of a protection order. 8 to 10 years, with possibility of parole after 6 with good behavior. Cameron had already been sentenced to 18 months for witness tampering and unlawful possession in a separate hearing last week. When it was over, Lila squeezed my arm. You did well, she whispered. Outside, under a gray October sky, my father waited by his truck. Proud of you, son, he said simply, patting my shoulder. Is it over? I asked Lila as we walked toward the parking lot. The criminal case is, she nodded. And we've secured the divorce terms, full ownership of the house, restitution for the damage to your shop safe, and legal fees covered. I breathed deeply, tasting the first hint of coming snow in the air. The weight I'd carried for months hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted somehow. Over the following weeks, I rebuilt what had been damaged. I replaced the broken lock on my shop, repainted the walls, reorganized tools that had been scattered in the vandalism. The routine helped. Early mornings, coffee brewing, hands busy with work that made sense. Bo, Mark's retriever, who'd become my unofficial roommate, slept by the counter while I worked. His presence filled the silence that used to feel so empty. My father visited every Sunday, always bringing enough food for 3 days. You're too skinny, he'd insist, unpacking containers of pot roast or lasagna while I pretended to complain. The first letter from Christine arrived 6 weeks after sentencing. Thin prison stationery, her familiar handwriting asking for forgiveness, explaining that fear had driven her actions. 2 more followed, each longer than the last, full of memories and regrets. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time with those letters, remembering the woman I'd thought I knew. Finally, I sent back copies of her plea agreement and a brief note. I wish you peace. I keep my distance. Sharon called once, her voice breaking. She made terrible choices, she admitted, but she's still my daughter. I know, I told her. Take care of yourself, Sharon. Then I hung up gently. This morning, I woke before dawn, made coffee, and sat on my porch as the first light broke over the trees. The world felt different. Not perfect, but quieter, more honest. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug and whispered to the rising sun. You chose the Glock. I chose my peace. For the first time in almost a year, the words felt completely true. I believe stories such as this find us for a reason. If this one touches you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day. In the meantime, there are 2 stories on the screen that are even better.